What happens when a joke goes too far, and the one you thought was powerless turns the tables? I never expected to be handed official court papers at my own front door, papers that changed my life and made me realize my harmless birthday prank wasn't so harmless after all. I stood in front of my bathroom mirror, applying the final touches of mascara, already planning how I'd steal the spotlight at Deacon's birthday dinner. Tonight wasn't really about celebrating my boyfriend of 3 years. It was about showing his uptight parents that their precious son had chosen someone who wouldn't bow down to their stuffy expectations. "Eluned, are you almost ready?" Deacon called from the bedroom, his voice carrying that familiar edge of anxiety that always appeared before family gatherings. "Just a minute, honey," I replied sweetly, though inside I was rolling my eyes. At 34, I'd learned that the best way to handle boring people was to shake them up a little. Deacon's parents, June and Walter Ellis, were the epitome of boring, retired teacher and engineer, respectively, who still acted like we were living in the 1950s. I smoothed down my red dress, the one that hugged my curves just right and would definitely make June purse her lips in disapproval. Perfect. Deacon appeared in the doorway, adjusting his tie nervously. At 36, he still dressed like his mother picked out his clothes. Conservative, safe, predictable. Sometimes I wondered what I saw in him, but then I remembered his steady accountant salary and the comfortable life he provided. "You look beautiful," he said, though his smile seemed forced. "Listen, about tonight, maybe we could keep things light. My parents have been looking forward to this dinner for weeks." I walked over and straightened his tie, letting my fingers linger on his chest. "Deacon, sweetheart, you worry too much. I'm just going to be myself. If your parents can't handle a little personality, that's their problem." His face fell slightly. "It's not about handling personality, Eluned. It's about what? About me not being the perfect little housewife they imagined for you." I turned back to the mirror, applying lipstick with deliberate precision. "I've been nothing but polite to them for 3 years. Tonight I'm going to have some fun." Deacon sighed, running his hand through his thinning hair. "Please, just remember that Mila will be there too. Our 7-year-old daughter." "Right." I softened my expression and turned to face him. "Of course I'll be appropriate around Mila. I'm not a monster, Deacon. I just think your parents need to loosen up a little." The drive to Romano's restaurant was tense. Deacon kept glancing at me nervously while I scrolled through my phone, texting my sister Tessa about my plans for the evening. "Going to give the in-laws a show tonight," I typed. "Time to ruffle some feathers." Tessa's response came quickly. "Be careful, Elle. You don't want to cause problems." I laughed out loud, causing Deacon to jump. "What's funny?" he asked. "Just something Tessa said," I replied, then added under my breath, "She's almost as boring as your parents." Romano's was packed for a Saturday night, but Deacon had reserved a large table in the back corner. I could see June and Walter already seated, along with little Mila, who was coloring in a book. They looked up as we approached, June's smile tight, and Walter giving his usual polite nod. "Happy birthday, son," June said, standing to hug Deacon. She was wearing one of her typical conservative blouses, beige and shapeless, paired with sensible slacks. Everything about her screamed, retired teacher who never had any fun. "Thank you, Mum," Deacon replied, genuinely warm with her, in a way he rarely was with me anymore. Walter stood and shook Deacon's hand firmly. 36 years old. Hard to believe. "Daddy," Mila jumped up and hugged Deacon around the waist. "I made you a card." I watched this little family reunion with growing irritation. They were all so wholesome, so predictable. Where was the excitement, the spontaneity? "Hello, Eluned," June said politely, offering me the same tight smile she always did. "June, Walter," I replied with exaggerated enthusiasm. "Don't you both look exactly the same as always?" Deacon shot me a warning look, but I just smiled innocently. The evening was young. We settled into our seats, and I made sure to order the most expensive wine on the menu. We're celebrating after all, I announced loudly enough for nearby tables to hear. It's not every day Deacon turns another year older. June winced at my volume, and I felt a little thrill of satisfaction. This was going to be easier than I thought. As we waited for our appetizers, June tried to make conversation. How's work going, Eluned? Still enjoying the marketing position? Oh, it's fine, I said dismissively, though I'm thinking about making some changes. Life's too short to be stuck in the same routine forever, don't you think? I let my eyes drift meaningfully to Deacon, who was studying his menu intently. June caught the implication, and her lips pressed into a thin line. Routine can be comforting, Walter said quietly. Stability has its benefits. I laughed, a sound just a bit too loud and sharp. Stability is just another word for boring, Walter. Some of us need a little excitement in our lives. Mila looked up from her coloring book, sensing the tension. Mummy, why are you talking funny? I'm not talking funny, sweetheart. I'm just having a conversation with Grandma and Grandpa about how different people like different things. Deacon reached over and squeezed my hand under the table, a clear signal to tone it down. I squeezed back, but not in agreement, more like a warning that he better not try to control me. The appetizers arrived, and I saw my opportunity. You know, I said, twirling pasta around my fork. Deacon was just telling me how worried he was about tonight. He thought I might embarrass you both. June's fork paused halfway to her mouth. Embarrass us? Why would he think that? Oh, you know how Deacon is. Always worried about what people think. He gets that from somewhere, doesn't he? I smiled sweetly at June, who was now looking genuinely confused and hurt. Eluned, Deacon said quietly, his voice carrying a warning. What? I'm just making conversation. I turned to Walter. Tell me, Walter, what did you think when Deacon first brought me home? Be honest now. Walter shifted uncomfortably in his seat. We were happy that Deacon had found someone who made him smile. How diplomatic, I said with another laugh. But I bet you were thinking something else entirely. I mean, I'm not exactly the type you probably imagined for your son, am I? The table fell silent except for the gentle scraping of Mila's crayons. June was staring at her plate, and Deacon looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. I think, June said carefully, that we should focus on celebrating Deacon's birthday. Oh, absolutely, I raised my wineglass. To Deacon, and to his wonderful family, who always know exactly the right thing to say. As the main courses arrived, I could feel the tension radiating from everyone at the table. But instead of backing down, I felt energized. This was the most interesting dinner I'd had with these people in years. I pulled out my phone and snapped a selfie, making sure to capture the uncomfortable expressions around the table. This is going straight to Instagram, I announced. Family dinner with the Ellis clan. Please don't, Deacon said quietly. Oh, come on, honey. Don't be such a stick in the mud. I posted the photo with the caption, Birthday dinner with the in-laws, trying to bring some life to the party. June was now openly staring at me with something approaching shock. Good. Maybe now she'd realize that her son hadn't chosen some meek little woman she could push around. As dessert arrived, a chocolate cake with Happy Birthday Deacon written in blue frosting, I knew it was time for my grand finale. I stood up, wineglass in hand, swaying slightly for effect. I'd like to make a toast, I announced, my voice carrying across the restaurant. Several nearby tables turned to look. Eluned, please sit down, Deacon whispered urgently. To Deacon's parents, I continued, ignoring him completely. June and Walter Ellis, who have spent 36 years teaching their son that the most important thing in life is what other people think. June's face went white. Walter reached over and took her hand. They've shown him that excitement is dangerous, that passion is inappropriate, and that the best way to live is to never, ever rock the boat. I took a sip of wine, enjoying the horrified silence around our table. But most importantly, I continued, my voice getting louder, they've taught him that a good woman is a quiet woman, a woman who smiles and nods and never, ever speaks her mind. Stop, Deacon said, but his voice was barely audible. Well, here's to June and Walter. I raised my glass higher, for showing me exactly what kind of woman I never want to become. June stood up abruptly, tears streaming down her face. Excuse me, she whispered, and hurried toward the restroom. Walter followed her without a word, leaving Deacon, Mila, and me at the table. The entire restaurant seemed to be staring at us. Mommy, Mila said in a small voice, why is Grandma crying? I sat back down, suddenly feeling the weight of what I'd just done, but instead of regret, I felt a strange sense of satisfaction. Finally, I'd said what I really thought. Deacon was staring at me with an expression I'd never seen before, not anger, not hurt, but something colder, something final. We're leaving, he said quietly, standing up and taking Mila's hand. Deacon, come on, I said, but he was already walking away, following his parents toward the exit. I sat alone at the table, surrounded by the ruins of the birthday dinner, and realized that something had fundamentally changed. But I pushed that thought away and ordered another glass of wine. After all, I'd only told the truth. The drive home was the longest 20 minutes of my life. Deacon hadn't spoken a single word since we left the restaurant, and Mila had fallen asleep in her car seat, exhausted by the emotional chaos of the evening. The silence in the car was deafening, broken only by the soft hum of the engine and the occasional sniffle from Deacon. When we pulled into our driveway, Deacon carefully lifted Mila from her seat and carried her inside, without waiting for me. I followed, my heels clicking loudly on the hardwood floor of our modest 2-story home. Deacon, I called softly as he disappeared upstairs with our daughter. We need to talk about this. He came back down 10 minutes later, having changed out of his dress shirt into a plain t-shirt and jeans. His face was still that same cold mask he'd worn at the restaurant. What exactly do you want to talk about, Eluned? His voice was eerily calm. I settled onto our beige sectional sofa, the one we'd picked out together 2 years ago when we'd moved in together. Look, I know tonight got a little heated, but... A little heated? Deacon's voice cracked slightly. You humiliated my parents in front of a room full of strangers. On my birthday. I rolled my eyes. Oh, please, I made a toast. If your parents can't handle a little honesty, maybe they should look at themselves instead of blaming me. Deacon stared at me for a long moment, and I could see something shifting in his expression. A little honesty? Eluned, you told an entire restaurant that my parents were terrible people. My mother was crying so hard in the parking lot that my father had to help her into the car. I never said they were terrible people, I protested, though even as I said it, I knew it was a weak defense. I just said they were set in their ways. You said they taught me that passion was inappropriate and that good women should be quiet. You implied that my mother was everything wrong with women. Deacon sat down across from me, but his posture was rigid, defensive. I felt a flutter of something that might have been guilt, but I pushed it down. Deacon, your parents have never liked me. From day one, they've treated me like I wasn't good enough for you. Tonight, I just finally stood up for myself. Stood up for yourself? Deacon's voice was getting louder now. My parents have been nothing but polite to you for 3 years. They've invited you to every family gathering. They remember your birthday. They ask about your work. What exactly have they done to deserve what you did tonight? I stood up and began pacing around the living room, my mind racing for the right words to make him understand. It's not about what they've done, Deacon. It's about what they haven't done. They've never accepted me. They look at me like I'm some kind of what? Like I'm not good enough for their precious son. The words burst out of me with more emotion than I'd intended. They want you to be with someone like your mother, boring, predictable, content to just fade into the background. Deacon was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Is that really what you think of my mother? That she's boring? That she faded into the background? Something in his tone made me pause. Deacon, my mother taught 3rd grade for 35 years. She helped hundreds of kids learn to read. She volunteered at the literacy center every weekend. She raised money for the children's hospital. She's been married to my father for 40 years, and they still hold hands when they walk down the street. His voice was getting stronger now, more passionate than I'd heard him in months. She bakes cookies for our neighbors when they're sick. She sends birthday cards to every person she's ever met. She called you every week for the first year we were dating, just to check on you because she wanted to make you feel welcome in our family. I felt my stomach drop. I remembered those calls, June asking about my work, my family, my interests. I'd always found them annoying, intrusive. But now... And you stood up in front of strangers and told the world that she was everything wrong with women. Deacon's voice broke on the last word. The guilt I'd been pushing down finally broke through, hitting me like a physical blow. But instead of apologizing, instead of admitting I'd gone too far, I felt myself getting defensive. She never really accepted me, Deacon. I could tell. How? The question was sharp, demanding. How could you tell? I struggled for an answer. It was the way she looked at me sometimes, like she was judging me. Or maybe, Deacon said quietly, she was trying to figure out why the woman her son loved was so determined to dislike her. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed with a text message. It was from my sister Tessa. Just saw your Instagram post. Call me. Now. I glanced at Deacon, who was now staring out the window into our backyard. I should call Tessa back. Of course you should, he said without turning around. I went into the kitchen to make the call, needing some distance from Deacon's accusing stare. Eluned, what the hell did you do? Tessa's voice was sharp with concern. I just made a toast at Deacon's birthday dinner. Everyone's overreacting. I saw your Instagram post. You looked drunk and everyone in the background looked miserable. What did you say? I gave her a sanitized version of events, focusing on how uptight Deacon's parents were and how I'd just been trying to lighten the mood. But even as I spoke, the words sounded hollow. Elle, you need to apologize, Tessa said when I finished. Like, immediately. This isn't some joke between friends. This is Deacon's family. Why is everyone taking their side? I snapped. I'm the one who's been putting up with their judgment for 3 years. Because maybe, just maybe, you're wrong about them. I've met June and Walter, remember? At Mila's birthday party last year. They were lovely. June spent an hour asking me about my job and telling me how proud she was of you for your promotion. I felt another stab of guilt. I'd forgotten about that conversation. You need to fix this, Tessa continued, before it's too late. After I hung up, I stood in the kitchen for several minutes, staring at the family photos on our refrigerator. There was one from last Christmas, Deacon, Mila, and me opening presents under the tree. We looked happy. When had that stopped being true? I walked back into the living room to find Deacon pulling a pillow and blanket from the hall closet. What are you doing? I'm sleeping on the couch tonight. He didn't look at me as he arranged the bedding. Deacon, come on, don't be dramatic. He finally turned to face me, and I was shocked by the pain in his eyes. Dramatic? Eluned, you humiliated my family. You posted about it on social media, and now you're acting like I'm the one being unreasonable. I'll delete the post, I offered quickly. It's too late for that. Half our friends have already seen it. My co-workers follow you on Instagram. My parents' friends were at that restaurant tonight. I felt a chill run down my spine. I hadn't thought about any of that when I'd posted the photo. Look, maybe I went a little too far with the toast, but a little too far. Deacon's voice cracked again. Eluned, my mother called me crying 20 minutes ago. She wanted to know what she'd done wrong. She's been going over every interaction she's ever had with you, trying to figure out where she failed. The guilt was overwhelming now, but I couldn't seem to stop myself from deflecting. She's being overly sensitive. Deacon stared at me for a long moment, then shook his head. You know what? I can't do this right now. I'm going to bed. On the couch. Yes, on the couch. As he settled onto the sofa, I headed upstairs to our bedroom, but I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about June's face when she'd left the restaurant, about Walter's protective hand on her shoulder, about Mila's confused question about why Grandma was crying. Around 2 in the morning, I gave up on sleep and crept downstairs for a glass of water. Deacon was lying on his back, staring at the ceiling. "Can't sleep either," I whispered. He didn't respond. I got my water and was heading back upstairs when I heard him speak. "I keep thinking about the first time I brought you home to meet them. Do you remember what my mum said to you?" I paused on the stairs. I did remember, actually. June had hugged me at the door and said, "Any woman who makes Deacon smile the way you do is already family to us." "She meant it," Deacon continued, his voice hollow. "She really meant it, and you threw it all away for what? For a few laughs from strangers?" I wanted to go back down, to sit with him, to try to explain, but I didn't know how to explain something I didn't fully understand myself. Instead, I went back to our empty bedroom and lay awake until dawn. The next morning, I woke to find Deacon already gone. There was a note on the kitchen counter. "Took Mila to my parents' house. We need some time to think." I stared at the note, feeling truly alone for the first time since the whole mess had started, and instead of using that time to reflect on what I'd done, I found myself getting angry all over again. They were all overreacting. It had been one toast, one moment of honesty. If Deacon's family couldn't handle that, maybe the problem wasn't with me. I picked up my phone and scrolled through the comments on my Instagram post. Most of them were from friends and co-workers, and they were mixed. "Girl, you look like you were having fun," from my co-worker Jessica. "Yikes, this looks awkward," from my college friend Mark. "Everything okay?" from several people, but it was the comment from my neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, that made my stomach drop. "I hope you're proud of yourself, dear. That poor family." Mrs. Patterson was friends with June. They volunteered together at the library. I deleted the post immediately, but I knew it was too late. The damage was done. Instead of calling Deacon to apologize, instead of driving to his parents' house to make things right, I did something that would later seem incredibly stupid. I called Dane. Dane Foster was a 32-year-old barista at the coffee shop near my office. We'd been flirting for months, and he'd been encouraging me to live a little and stop letting boring people hold me back. He was everything Deacon wasn't: spontaneous, exciting, dangerous. "Hey, beautiful," he answered on the second ring. "How did the family dinner go?" "It was a disaster," I said, and found myself telling him everything. But in my version, I was the victim, the misunderstood woman just trying to bring some life to a stuffy family gathering. "You know what you need?" Dane said when I finished. "You need to get out of that house. Come meet me at the cafe. We'll talk about it." I knew I shouldn't. I knew Deacon was hurting, that I should be trying to fix things with him and his family. But I was tired of feeling guilty, tired of being made to feel like the villain. "I'll be there in 20 minutes, I said. As I drove to meet Dane, I told myself I was just getting coffee with a friend, just talking to someone who understood me. It wasn't until I was sitting across from him in the corner booth, his hand covering mine on the table, that I realized I'd crossed a line I couldn't uncross. "You deserve so much better than this," Dane said, his thumb tracing circles on my palm. "You're vibrant and alive, and they're trying to dim your light." I wanted to believe him. It was so much easier than facing the truth about what I'd done. But as I sat there, letting another man comfort me while my family was falling apart, I couldn't shake the image of June's tears, or the sound of Deacon's broken voice saying my name. I just wasn't ready to face what that meant yet. The next few days passed in a blur of tense silences and careful avoidance. Deacon had returned home with Mila on Sunday evening, but he might as well have been a stranger. He spoke to me only when necessary. About Mila's school schedule, about bills that needed paying, about practical matters that required coordination. But the warm, easy conversation we'd once shared was gone, replaced by polite distance that felt worse than outright anger. I threw myself into work, staying late at the marketing firm where I'd been employed for the past 2 years. At least there, I could pretend everything was normal. My coworkers knew about the dinner disaster. Several of them had seen my deleted Instagram post, but they seemed to be taking a wait-and-see approach to the situation. It was Wednesday afternoon when I found myself walking to Dane's coffee shop during my lunch break. I told myself I was just getting coffee, but I knew that wasn't entirely true. "Hey there, stranger," Dane said with that crooked smile that had first caught my attention months ago. He was tall and lean, with dark hair that always looked slightly tousled and eyes that seemed to see right through people's pretenses. Everything about him screamed excitement and possibility. "Just coffee today," I said, but I was already gravitating toward our usual corner booth. "Rough week?" he asked, bringing over my usual latte and sliding into the seat across from me. "You could say that." I wrapped my hands around the warm mug, grateful for something to focus on, besides his intense gaze. "Deacon's barely speaking to me. His parents haven't called once, which is actually unusual for them, and Mila keeps asking why everyone seems sad." Dane reached across the table and covered my hand with his. "You know this isn't your fault, right? You were just being honest. If they can't handle honesty, that says more about them than it does about you." I wanted to believe him. It was so much easier than accepting responsibility for the pain I'd caused. "Sometimes I think you're the only person who really gets me." "That's because I see who you really are," he said, his thumb tracing small circles on my skin. "You're passionate and real and alive. You shouldn't have to dim that light for anyone." We talked for another hour, and I found myself sharing things I'd never told Deacon. My frustrations with our routine life, my feeling that I was slowly disappearing into the role of accountant's girlfriend, my fear that I was wasting the best years of my life playing it safe. "You know," Dane said as I prepared to leave, "my shift ends at 6 tonight. If you wanted to grab dinner somewhere—" I knew I should say no. I knew that having dinner with Dane would cross a line that I might not be able to uncross. But looking into his eyes, feeling desired and understood for the first time in months, I heard myself saying, "Where did you have in mind?" "There's a little Italian place on 5th Street. Molto bene. Very private." The way he said private sent a thrill through me that I hadn't felt in years. "I'll meet you there at 7, I said. That evening, I told Deacon I was working late on a big presentation. He barely looked up from helping Mila with her homework. "Okay," he said simply. "I'll handle dinner and bedtime." His easy acceptance of my lie made me feel both guilty and irritated. Shouldn't he care more? Shouldn't he fight for me? Molto Bene was exactly as Dane had described. Small, dimly lit, with intimate booths tucked away from prying eyes. We talked and laughed over wine and pasta, and for a few hours, I forgot about the mess waiting for me at home. "You're different when you're away from all that," Dane observed as we shared tiramisu. "Lighter, more yourself." "Maybe this is who I really am," I said, the wine making me bold. "Maybe the person I am at home is just an act." Dane leaned closer. "Then maybe it's time to stop acting." When he walked me to my car, he kissed me. It was soft at first, tentative, then deeper as I responded. For those few moments, I felt alive in a way I hadn't in years. "I should go," I whispered against his lips. "Should and want are two different things," he replied. But I did go home, slipping into the house just after 10 to find Deacon already asleep on the couch. He'd been sleeping there every night since the dinner disaster, and I'd stopped trying to convince him to come back to our bed. I crept upstairs and lay awake, replaying every moment of the evening with Dane. I felt guilty, but I also felt more alive than I had in months. Was that so wrong? The next morning brought an unexpected complication. I was getting ready for work when my phone rang. It was Tessa. "Elle, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me." Something in her tone made me nervous. "Okay." "Where were you last night?" I drove by your office around 8:30 to drop off those documents you asked for, and your car wasn't there. My heart started pounding. I went to grab dinner. I was still working, just not in the office. Alone? The question hung in the air between us. Tessa knew me too well. She could always tell when I was lying. Does it matter? I asked, trying to sound casual. Elle, please tell me you're not doing what I think you're doing. I don't know what you think I'm doing. I think you're having an affair. The words were blunt, direct. And I think you're using this fight with Deacon's parents as an excuse to blow up your life. I felt exposed, caught. That's ridiculous. Is it? Because the Eluned I know wouldn't humiliate her boyfriend's family in public unless she was looking for a way out. And the Eluned I know definitely wouldn't lie to me about where she was last night unless she had something to hide. I ended the call without answering, but Tessa's words haunted me for the rest of the day. Was I looking for a way out? Had I sabotaged the dinner on purpose? That afternoon, I met Dane again during my lunch break. This time, I was more direct about what I wanted. I can't stop thinking about last night, I said as soon as I sat down. Good, he replied, that dangerous smile playing at his lips. Because I have a proposition for you. He slid a key across the table. My roommate's out of town for the weekend. If you want to continue this conversation somewhere more private... I stared at the key, knowing that picking it up would change everything. Behind me, I heard a familiar laugh and turned to see two women from my office, Jessica and Amanda, sitting at a table near the window. They were too far away to hear our conversation, but close enough to see Dane slide the key across the table. I quickly covered the key with my hand and smiled at them. They waved back, but I could see the curiosity in their expressions. Friends of yours? Dane asked. Co-workers, I said, slipping the key into my purse. This is getting complicated. The best things usually are. That evening, Deacon surprised me by actually trying to have a conversation. Mila was in her room playing, and he found me in the kitchen cleaning up after dinner. We need to talk about what happens next, he said, leaning against the counter. My heart jumped. What do you mean? I mean, we can't keep going like this. The silence, the sleeping on the couch, pretending everything's normal for Mila's sake. Something has to change. I turned to face him fully. What do you want to change? I want you to apologize to my parents. Really apologize. Not just say you're sorry they were offended. I want you to acknowledge that what you did was wrong. The reasonable part of me knew he was right. But I'd spent the past week being told by Dane that I'd done nothing wrong, that I was just being authentic, that Deacon's family was trying to control me. And if I don't, I asked. Deacon was quiet for a long moment. Then I think we need to seriously consider whether this relationship is working. The words should have terrified me. Instead, I felt a strange sense of relief. If Deacon ended things, I wouldn't have to feel guilty about Dane. I wouldn't have to choose. Maybe you're right, I said quietly. Maybe we should think about that. Something flickered across Deacon's face. Surprise, hurt, disappointment. Is that really what you want? I looked at this man I'd been with for 3 years, the father of my daughter, and felt nothing. No passion, no excitement, no desperate need to fight for what we had. I don't know, I said honestly. I don't know what I want anymore. Deacon nodded slowly. Okay, then maybe we both need some time to figure that out. He started to leave the kitchen, then turned back. For what it's worth, Eluned, I did love you. I probably still do. But I can't be with someone who thinks so little of the people I care about. After he left, I sat at the kitchen table and stared at Dane's key. Deacon had just given me an out, a way to end things without having to be the villain. All I had to do was refuse to apologize, and he'd probably end the relationship himself. I pulled out my phone and texted Dane. Can we meet tomorrow? I think it's time we stop pretending this is just friendship. His response came immediately. I was wondering when you'd be ready to admit that. Tomorrow can't come soon enough. As I headed upstairs to bed, I passed the living room where Deacon was arranging his blankets on the couch. He looked up at me. and for a moment, I saw the man I'd fallen in love with 3 years ago, kind, steady, reliable Deacon, who'd never done anything but try to love me. "Good night, Eluned," he said softly. "Good night," I replied, and continued upstairs. I didn't know it then, but it would be one of the last normal conversations we'd ever have. Friday arrived with an email that made my stomach drop. Our company's monthly team meeting had been moved to Romano's restaurant, the same restaurant where I'd humiliated Deacon's parents just a week earlier. The irony wasn't lost on me, and I briefly considered calling in sick, but I'd already missed 2 days this week for appointments that were actually extended lunch dates with Dane. I arrived at Romano's to find my co-workers already gathered around a large table in the main dining room. Jessica waved me over to an empty seat beside her, and I noticed several people glance at me with expressions I couldn't quite read. "How are things going?" Jessica asked quietly as our manager, Robert, shuffled through his presentation notes. "Fine," I lied. "Why?" "Just, you seem stressed lately, and after that Instagram post last weekend..." I felt heat rise in my cheeks. That was just a family thing. It's handled. But as Robert began discussing our quarterly goals, I found my attention drifting. The booth where we'd sat for Deacon's birthday dinner was visible from where I sat, and I kept replaying that awful toast in my mind. My phone buzzed with a text from Dane. "Thinking about you. Can't wait for tonight." Tonight. I'd finally agreed to go to his apartment. Deacon thought I was having drinks with co-workers after the meeting, and technically, that wasn't a complete lie. I was planning to have one drink with the team before slipping away. "Eluned," Robert's voice cut through my thoughts. "What's your update on the Morrison account?" I scrambled to focus, giving a quick rundown of the campaign I'd been developing, but I could feel my co-workers' eyes on me, and I wondered if they could sense my distraction. After the meeting, most of the team decided to stay for happy hour. I ordered a glass of wine and tried to participate in the conversation, but my mind kept wandering to Dane's apartment key in my purse. "So," Amanda said, settling into the chair beside me, "how are things with Deacon? You guys seemed pretty tense at his birthday dinner." I nearly choked on my wine. "You were here that night." "My sister and I were at the bar. We saw the whole thing." Amanda's expression was carefully neutral, but I could see the judgment in her eyes. "It wasn't as bad as it probably looked," I said quickly. "Really? Because it looked like you made his mother cry." The conversation around our table had quieted, and I realized everyone was listening. Heat flooded my face as I tried to find words to defend myself. "It was just a misunderstanding," I said finally. "Family dynamics, you know?" "I don't know," said Marcus, one of the younger guys on our team. "I mean, if someone talked about my mom like that in public, I'd be pretty upset too." "You don't know the whole story," I snapped, my voice louder than I'd intended. Okay, Jessica intervened. "Let's not relitigate family drama." But the damage was done. I could see it in their faces. The way they looked at me had changed. I wasn't just Eluned from marketing anymore. I was the woman who'd humiliated her boyfriend's family in public. I excused myself to go to the bathroom, and while I was washing my hands, I heard 2 women from the accounting department talking in the stalls. "Did you see her Instagram post last week? She looked completely unhinged." "I heard she's been having problems at home. My friend lives in their neighborhood and said she saw her leaving really late one night, all dressed up, while her boyfriend was home with their kid." At the restaurant bathroom, I overheard co-workers whispering, "She humiliated his parents. Now she's cheating. Poor Deacon." Their faces flushed when they saw me. "Eluned, we didn't." I pushed past, cold. Back at the table, judgment lingered. I downed my wine and left early. "Plans," I lied. I drove to Dane's apartment in a haze. He opened the door, handed me wine, listened as I vented about the meeting, the stairs, feeling misunderstood. "They're jealous," he said. "You're honest, passionate, real." His kiss pulled me in. I followed him to bed. Afterward, satisfaction mixed with emptiness, I'd crossed the line completely. My phone buzzed. Deacon's text. "Hope you're having fun. Mila asks when you'll be home." Guilt slammed me. I dressed quietly. Dane stirred. "Leaving?" "I have to." "When can I see you again?" "I don't know. This is complicated." "You could leave him. Choose yourself." Driving home, his words echoed. "Choose yourself." I slipped in after midnight. Deacon sat at the kitchen table, papers spread. "How are drinks?" "Fine." "You smell like cologne." "Not mine." I laughed it off. "Hug from accounting." He studied me, unconvinced. At the doorway, he stopped me. "We need to talk about my parents, about us." "Maybe we don't go anywhere," I said quietly. "Maybe this is as far as we go." Pain crossed his face. "Is that what you want?" I thought of Dane's touch, the freedom. "I think maybe it is." Deacon nodded. "Okay, we know where we stand." Upstairs, I felt lighter, finally honest, finally choosing me. I didn't see the small recorder among his papers. Some mistakes carry recordings that echo forever. The next 2 weeks blurred into limbo. Deacon slept on the couch. We spoke only about Mila's schedule, bills, logistics. I kept meeting Dane. Lunch breaks stretched into stolen afternoons, lies about overtime piling higher. I told myself it was temporary, just figuring things out. Deep down, I knew the double life couldn't last. The crack came Tuesday afternoon. Tessa waited in my office, door closed. "I followed you yesterday. Saw you leave that Maple Street apartment looking wrecked. Who is he?" I collapsed into my chair. "It's not what you think." "Really? Because it looks like you're cheating while Deacon cares for your daughter and thinks you're just stressed." "He doesn't understand me anymore. Dane does." Tessa's laugh was bitter. Classic. "He understands me. You humiliated his parents, started an affair, lied to everyone. When do you stop being the villain in your own story?" Her words burned. That evening, Mila asked why we didn't laugh anymore, why we looked sad. Deacon knelt. "Grown-ups have hard times, baby, but we love you." She asked if we'd divorce like Tommy's parents. We both froze. Later, Deacon said, "We can't keep pretending. Either we fix this or we don't." I chose space. "Maybe separate for a while." He nodded. "I'll find an apartment. Mila stays here." June called the next morning, voice gentle. "I've been wondering what I did to make you feel unwelcome." Guilt crushed me. "You did nothing. I was cruel." That afternoon, Dane texted about a weekend alone. I stared, then typed, "I can't do this anymore. It's destroying my life." He argued. I turned off my phone. Home, Deacon packed dishes. I stopped him. "I've been having an affair." "I know," he said quietly. "I've known for weeks. I hoped you'd choose us." I ended it today. "Because you want to save us? Or because you got caught?" I had no answer. He resumed packing. Freedom, the thing I'd chased, felt like ashes. I'd traded a loving family for secrets and excitement that vanished the moment consequences arrived. Now the house echoed with loss, and the only path left was facing the woman I'd become. 3 days after Deacon moved out, the manila envelope arrived. Legal separation papers from Patterson and Associates. Deacon petitioned for primary custody of Mila, supervised visitation for me until I proved emotional stability. Supporting evidence chilled me. Screenshots of my deleted Instagram post, bank statements showing secret cafe dates with Dane, phone records and worst, a hidden recording of my own voice admitting the affair. Maybe this is as far as we go. I called Dane in panic. He laughed it off. "Your accountant's ruthless. You chose excitement over responsibility. Good luck." He showed me the door. My mother lectured. "You gave him ammunition." Even she sided with Deacon. Desperate, I met lawyer Jennifer Walsh. She was blunt. "His case is airtight. Infidelity, instability, emotional harm. Demonstrate real change. End contact with Dane. Therapy, genuine remorse. You might negotiate joint custody eventually. I blocked Dane, started counseling, wrote sincere apologies to Deacon's parents. The breaking point came during visitation. Mila cried, "Tommy said you have a boyfriend. Is that why you left?" I knelt, tears falling. Mummy made terrible choices. I hurt Daddy, Grandma, Grandpa, and you. I forgot how lucky I was. She hugged me tight. "Can you remember now?" "I'm trying, baby. So hard." At the hearing, I accepted Deacon's terms fully, alternating weekends, one evening weekly, and read my court apology. I take full responsibility. I betrayed trust, hurt innocence, prioritized selfishness over my daughter. I have only regret and commitment to change. Deacon's handwritten letter arrived later. "I hope you find the woman worth loving again, for Mila's sake." The judge signed. Walking out, freedom tasted like ashes. I'd won independence but lost everything that mattered. Mila deserved better. Now I had to earn the right to be that mother. One honest, accountable step at a time.